Chapter 2575. Chu Lingfeng's expression was ferocious, his aura ferocious. Chu Yuqing had said so much just now, but he'd treated it as a fart. But now he couldn't take Chu Yuqing's words any longer. That elixir wasn't here? Then how was he going to treat his master's grandfather's legs? Chu Lingfeng was furious. He clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles creaked. He'd been ignoring Chu Yuqing and the others' attacks, but now he turned his head and glared fiercely at them. These bastards, they dared to trick him. Chu Lingfeng had a one-track mind. Ever since he'd arrived at the Tianfeng Chu clan, he'd been asking around for elixirs that could help old Master Luo recover his legs. But even the Tianfeng Chu clan, a great clan in the 6-star region, didn't have that kind of elixir. Chu Lingfeng had no choice but to keep it in mind. He'd see where he could get it in the future. But who would have thought that Chu Yuqing and the others would use this against him? Chu Lingfeng's heart was both depressed and furious. It wasn't because he'd been tricked, but because this elixir was fake. This way he wouldn't be able to bring this elixir back to his master. These bastards, they all deserved to die. In Chu Lingfeng's eyes, these people could casually deal with him and call him an idiot. But if anyone dared to joke about Luo Qingtong, he'd kill them. Chu Yuqing and the others had touched his reverse scale. Humph, so what if I tricked you? Who told you to be an idiot? Seeing Chu Lingfeng's murderous gaze, Chu Yuqing sneered. The other party was already a turtle in their jar, yet he still dared to look at him like that. Did he really think that he couldn't be killed? But now that he'd fallen into their hands, even if Chu Lingfeng really had an immortal body, they'd kill him right here and now. Speaking of which, it was Chu Lingfeng himself who was stupid. This time he didn't want any guards to follow him, giving them a chance to make a move. Chu Yuqing didn't know that this was because Chu Lingfeng had been preparing to leave the Chu clan after leaving the abandoned continent. That was why he hadn't sent any guards with him. He assumed that Chu Yuqing was just being stupid. He had a smug smile on his face. Chu Lingfeng, you fool. You shouldn't be the young master of the Chu clan. Just based on a brainless thing like you, what right do you have to occupy the position of the Chu clan's young master? That position should have been mine. He's from our third elders faction. Just wait and die here obediently. After you die, our third elders people will return to the main branch. At that time I will be the new young master. Right, I forgot to tell you. Chu Yuqing's words were filled with malice. Madame Xing has already agreed to fully support our third elders faction. And the condition is, to send that bitch of a mother of yours to accompany you in hell. Chapter 2576. The people she'd sent to his side all obeyed his orders to kill Chu Lingfeng. Otherwise, even if he'd surrounded Chu Lingfeng, he wouldn't have been able to do anything to this monstrous man. After all, Chu Lingfeng's regenerative abilities were simply astonishing. And the more he fought, the stronger he became. He wasn't that easy to kill. But now Chu Lingfeng was destined to die at his hands. Chu Yuqing's voice was savage, but Chu Lingfeng's eyes were already completely red. You dare have designs on my mother? You all deserve to die. His voice roared. In an instant he braved the attacks of Chu Yuqing and the others and charged at them like a mad bull. Young Master Yuqing, get out of the way. One of Chu Yuqing's guards shouted in a low voice. He raised his hand and pulled Chu Yuqing behind him. Then wave after wave of attacks suppressed Chu Lingfeng's figure, which had rushed forward once again. They were all guards assigned to the top disciples of the Tianfeng Chu clan. Their strength was much higher than that of ordinary mercenaries, and they were all solitary experts. Now that they'd launched their attacks, even with Chu Lingfeng's regenerative abilities and bloodline abilities, he couldn't withstand their attacks. He was immediately pushed back into the center of the encirclement. Haha, Chu Lingfeng, you idiot. You still want to kill me? Wait until you're underground, then slowly think about it. Chu Yuqing sneered as he stood behind the guards. Send a group of people to lure over that magical beast horde we've been eyeing. Wait until his bloodline power is almost exhausted, then let those magical beasts trample him to death. When that time comes, let's see who can trace it back to us. Chu Yuqing ordered. Yes. The guards obeyed his orders. Immediately, a group of experts among the guards broke away and rushed outside. When they were scheming against Chu Lingfeng, they had already set their sights on a group of magical beasts nearby. Luring Chu Lingfeng over would definitely cause him to be dismembered and devoured by those magical beasts when his bloodline power was exhausted and he was heavily injured. Behind Chu Lingfeng, Snowball was kneeling on the ground. Its fur was dyed with blood, and its cries were indescribably mournful. From the very beginning, it had been attacked by Chu Lingfeng and the others in order to prevent it from escaping with Chu Yuqing and the others. At this moment, Its right leg was dangling on the ground. It was clearly broken and could not get up at all. However, Chu Yuqing and the others didn't pay any attention to it. They only focused on attacking Chu Lingfeng, vowing to kill him here and now. At this moment, Luo Qingtong's figure was approaching the forest. In this abandoned continent, she had fully opened her blood-red eye. It was as if she had a holographic map of this abandoned continent in her eyes. She easily analyzed the fastest and shortest route to this place. Chapter 2577. These people were the best of the best among Chu Yuqing's bodyguards. They had to lure these magical beasts, but they couldn't be injured. They couldn't allow Chu Lingfeng's encirclement to slip through because there were too many of them. The ones who'd been sent to lure these magical beasts were all the best of the best. Their combined strength was at least of the 6th level of the human martial realm. In fact, if it weren't for the fact that it was difficult to find lone practitioners at the 9th level of the human martial realm to take on the task of guarding, the bodyguards of these top disciples of the Tianfeng Chu clan would all be experts at the 8th or 9th level of the human martial realm. However, experts at the 7th or 8th level were enough to show disdain for the crowd. The group of figures dashed madly through the dense forest, followed by a pack of enraged magical beasts. Luo Qingtong's figure appeared at the edge of the dense forest. When she saw these people luring the magical beasts in the direction of Chu Yuqing's group, she keenly sensed that these people were heading for the same destination as her. This was getting interesting. Seeing these people attack the magical beasts without harming them, only focusing on luring them away, Luo Qingtong narrowed her eyes and quickly guessed their intentions. After all this time, Chu Lingfeng hadn't brought any bodyguards with him to this abandoned continent. These bodyguards definitely weren't his people. They were luring the magical beasts in the direction of Snowball. In Luo Qingtong's mind, the words "kill with a borrowed knife," "destroy the corpses and destroy the evidence" flashed through her mind. She narrowed her eyes and glanced in the direction where those people had left. Then she quietly left the place. Swish! Luo Qingtong's figure appeared in the distance in front of those people. The blood-red pupils in her eyes spun violently, quickly predicting the most likely route they would take. Then she raised her hand and an invisible thread shot out from her hand. In an instant, a huge net of crisscrossing threads appeared in front of Luo Qingtong. These threads were extracted by Luo Qingtong from the corpses of the 1,000 silkworms. It was originally intended to be used to forge Yi Qianxian's meridians. However, this was an urgent matter, so he couldn't care less. Besides, Luo Qingtong still had the insect treasure from the giant king worm. That was the real treasure for Yi Qianming to forge his meridians. These threads were only used as backups. It was not a big deal to use some of them. Luo Qingtong's speed was extremely fast. She quickly set up the huge net trap in front of her. With a leap, she leaped onto the top of an ancient tree and hid there, waiting for the guards to lure the magical beasts over. And after she was done, the guards quickly lured the magical beasts over. Rumble. In the dense forest, a loud sound rang out. It was the sound of heavy hooves stomping on the ground. These magical beasts looked like black rhinoceroses. Their bodies were covered in thick rock-like armor and their mouths were filled with sharp teeth. They looked extremely terrifying. At this moment, under the lure of the guards, they were rushing in the direction of Luo Qingtong. However, just as the guards were about to rush into the huge net of threads set up by Luo Qingtong, the magical beasts suddenly stopped. They looked warily at the place where the huge net of threads was, then turned around and ran in the direction they came from. They had already discovered the danger. Chapter 2578. Seeing this scene, Luo Qingtong frowned. She hadn't expected these magical beasts to have such a strong sense of danger. They had actually discovered the danger so easily. It was also because she had been in too much of a hurry that she hadn't had time to remove the scent of the 1,000 silkworms from the threads. Now that the magical beasts had left, would the guards realize that something was wrong? She looked at the guards. The guards also stopped in their tracks. However, they didn't think that there would be any danger in the surroundings. The group had set up an ambush in this dense forest and had carefully surveyed the surroundings. They had even checked all the dangers in the surroundings. Moreover, with their strength, if there was any danger in the vicinity, how could they not have detected it? Therefore, the strange movements of the magical beasts were seen as part of their plan. When the magical beasts saw that they were deliberately luring them, they became vigilant and refused to move forward. Seeing that the magical beasts were about to run further and further away, completely ignoring their bait, the guards became anxious. They had gone to great lengths to trap Chu Lingfeng in this dense forest. It was very likely that this was their only chance. If they missed this chance, they wouldn't be able to make a move against Chu Lingfeng. After escaping the encirclement, he would definitely leave this abandoned continent. At that time, when he returned to the Tianfeng Chu clan and told them about the ambush, they would all be finished, including Chu Yuqing. How could this be? The hearts of the guards sank. Try using this. Miss Kerr and the others brought it. It said that it was this that caused them to be hunted down by the magical beasts of the abandoned continent. As a guard spoke, he took out a handful of emerald green spiritual grass. Luo Qingtong looked at the extra spiritual herbs in his hand and blinked her eyes. Damn. It couldn't be, right? Wasn't this the spiritual grass that she had tricked Chu Kerr and the others into taking away, the beast-baiting grass? It had actually appeared in the hands of these guards. Could it be that the people these guards were loyal to had some relationship with Chu Kerr and the others? But Chu Kerr and the others were really lucky. They had been chased by the magical beasts with the beast-baiting grass and hadn't died? Not only that, he even met the person who was going against Chu Lingfeng. However, it was fortunate that they met the people who were dealing with Chu Lingfeng. Otherwise, how would these people be able to lure those magical beasts back? How could his own design succeed? Luo Qingtong's lips curled up slightly. She had just wanted to jump out and use herself as a bait to lure those people into the net trap. However, with his sudden appearance and the abnormal behavior of those magical beasts, there was a high probability that these people would discover that he had done something. At that time they would not be fooled. Even if she used all her trump cards, she might not be able to kill all of them. But now, with the beast-luring grass provided by Chu Kerr, Luo Qingtong only needed to watch them step into the trap. Therefore, after Luo Qingtong saw the beast-luring grass, she decisively hid herself again. The guards took the beast-luring grass and went to lure the magical beasts in batches. The lure of the beast-luring grass was mixed with their attacks, and sure enough, those magical beasts that had left returned. Rumble. Chapter 2579. This time, the magical beasts that were tempted by the beast-luring grass to the point that they lost their minds and only knew how to charge forward madly, did not discover the danger in front of them. Together with the guards, they rushed madly towards the huge net trap. Boom boom boom. The guards held the beast-luring grass high and were only prepared to pass through the forest below Luo Qingtong. However, when they rushed to the middle of the forest, in an instant streams of blood splashed out. The silk threads of the 1,000 silkworms turned into the coldest and most terrifying killing weapons, cutting their limbs and bones, along with their heads and necks, into pieces. Countless pieces of corpses rose from the crisscrossing huge net. Luo Qingtong's net trap was much tighter than those made by the 1,000 silkworms before. Under her blood-red eyes, these net traps had no blind spots at all. Those silk threads seemed to have been precisely calculated by someone, appearing at the places that the guards had to pass through, cutting their bodies from top to bottom. In an instant, blood flowed like a river, fog rose into the air, and the surrounding forest was dyed into a bloody color. These experts at the 7th or 8th level of the human martial realm, even in death, did not expect that they would be killed by a trap set by someone else when they set up a trap to kill Chu Lingfeng. Their corpses were dismembered in mid-air. Some of the stronger ones did not die after being cut up for a while, and could only stare at everything in the forest. They saw that under the soaking and splashing of their blood, the huge net lines entwined in the forest were revealed, like a huge mouth of a magical beast that chose people to devour, completely swallowing their bodies. And in this bloody scene, a young man wearing a light blue robe fell from the top of a tree. Deske, if it's not red clothes, then it's easy to get dirty. They heard the young man say with disdain. The appearance on her face was covered by more than half of the birthmark, looking both ferocious and terrifying. Landing in this bloody scene, she was like a demon god that destroyed the world. However, the smile on her lips was extremely evil and bewitching. It gave people a feeling that there was nothing wrong with it. Whether it was the ugliness or the malevolence on her face, it all turned into a perfect contrast to her peerless charm. People could only see her unparalleled elegance and neglect everything else. This was an extremely beautiful and enchanting young man. He had a demonic charm that seeped into his bones. With a single glance, one would be captivated and bewitched. Shwa. Luo Qingtong raised her hand and brushed away the blood mist. When the guards were cut to death, the strong aura of death and the smell of blood covered the aura of the beast-luring grass, causing them to regain their rationality in an instant. At that moment, as they looked at the giant blood-colored net before them, their 4 hooves began to incessantly dig into the ground as they desperately tried to stop their footsteps. However, their momentum was too strong and they couldn't stop for a while. However, Luo Qingtong had no intention of letting them all die here. She still had great use for these magical beasts. Therefore, after she brushed away the blood mist, she raised her hand and whipped. In the blink of an eye, the giant crimson net that was constructed by her was torn apart and scattered in all directions. Bang! Chapter 2580. The beasts had just escaped death and were about to scatter in all directions. However, the threads in Luo Qingtong's hands seemed to have grown eyes and didn't care which direction they were going. Those blood-colored threads shot out at the first instant and blocked their path. The magical beasts that had rushed to the front were the first to have their limbs cut off by those threads and their flesh cut open. There was no other way. Those magical beasts that wanted to scatter and flee could only gather together again. Luo Qingtong used those blood-colored threads to drive them in the direction of Chu Lingfeng and the others. Moreover, because of Luo Qingtong's drive and the threat of the threads, their emotions were even crazier and more impulsive than before. They charged towards Chu Yuqing and the others with an imposing momentum that seemed to be able to move mountains and rivers. Rumble. In the dense forest, a rumbling sound reverberated through the sky. Because Luo Qingtong's ambush and killing of those guards had been extremely clean and efficient. Those guards didn't even know that they had fallen into a trap until they died, so they didn't even let out a single scream. The entire process was indescribably silent. No one knew that an extreme massacre had just taken place in this dense forest. Swoosh! Luo Qingtong's figure rushed out and followed behind those magical beasts, silently rushing forward. While Luo Qingtong drove those magical beasts away, Chu Yufei and the others were waiting on a hillside outside the dense forest, gazing into the distance at the scene in the dense forest. Hearing the earth-shaking footsteps, Chuker's face was full of joy. Haha, it must be my big brother who summoned those magical beasts. Chuker's face was full of pride and satisfaction. Big brother and the others must have succeeded. That Chu Lingfeng was dead for sure. Once he died, her big brother would obtain the Tianluo grass from this trip to the abandoned continent, and there would be hope for their third elder's bloodline to return to the main line. After his elder brother consumed the Sky Luo grass and obtained the immortal spirit body, his cultivation speed increased greatly. In the future, who in the Tianfeng Chu clan would be able to compete with them? As for her, the third miss of the Tianfeng Chu family, who would be able to deal with her then? That Luo Shaoqi and Chu Xiaofeng, she must teach them a lesson. Thinking of these two people, Chu Ker's face turned ugly. She had left in a hurry after obtaining the beast-luring grass with Chu Tianming and the rest. Originally, they were afraid that Chu Xiaofeng and the others would go back on their word and snatch the spiritual herbs back from them. However, who would have thought that those spiritual herbs were actually beast-luring grass? They were overjoyed when they saw the spiritual grasses and left with them. Chapter 2581. Her and Chu Yufei's pure and clean bodies were all seen by the group of uncouth guards. When this operation was over, they would become the laughingstock of many people. And all of this was because of Chu Xiaofeng and Luo Shaoqi. Especially that Luo Shaoqi. Thinking of how she didn't hesitate to let them take away those spiritual herbs, Chu Ke didn't believe that she didn't know the effects of those spiritual herbs. She must have known. She knew that those were beast-lure grass. Otherwise, she wouldn't have stubbornly given those spiritual herbs to them. At that time, she thought that she was afraid of them and wanted to spend money to avoid disaster. In the end, what did she mean by spending money to avoid disaster? The other party was clearly waiting for them to fall into his trap. Seeing them get the beast-luring grass in their hands, they didn't even realize it. B*tc. B*starred. Chu Ker's face was ugly and her limbs were trembling. She wished she could chop Luo Shaoqi into pieces. And Chu Xiaofeng who indulged Luo Shaoqi. If it weren't for him, Luo Shaoqi wouldn't have given those spiritual herbs to them. In short, all of this was their fault. When Chu Ker's voice sounded, beside her, Chu Yufei's face also revealed a gloomy smile. Compared to before, Chu Yufei was very different. The most obvious thing was that the gentle and kind smile on her face was gone. At this moment, Chu Yufei's face was cold and her eyes were cold. Her eyes were full of resentment and ice. She and Chu Ke had encountered those things together and had completely destroyed the defense in her heart. Thinking that she was the one who forced Luo Shaoqi to give those spiritual herbs to them, Chu Yufei's heart was filled with hatred. She was good at playing with people's hearts and acting. At that time, she thought that they had taken advantage of her by forcing Luo Shaoqi to give those spiritual herbs to them. At the same time, she felt that she had vented her anger. In the end, who would have thought that it was all her wishful thinking? In fact, Luo Shaoqi had deliberately given those spiritual herbs to them. She wanted them to be chased by those magical beasts. She hated that she thought that her scheme had succeeded. In the end, she was played in circles. Now that Chu Lingfeng had died, she would never let Luo Shaoqi and the others off. At that time, let's see how Chu Xiaofeng will protect them. Chu Yufei's face darkened. As for Chu Tianming and the others, they looked in the direction of the dense forest and were overjoyed. After getting rid of Chu Lingfeng, the third elder's people would once again be in the direct line of descent. At that time, if they had a good relationship with Chu Ke and the others, when Chu Yuqing ascended to the position, wouldn't they be able to obtain great benefits? Everyone was trying their best to flatter Chu Ke. At the same time, they were also very attentive to Chu Yufei. Chapter 2582. Rumble. Chu Yuqing and the others were attacking Chu Lingfeng with all their might. Because they didn't want others to find out that they were the ones who had attacked Chu Lingfeng, they didn't dare to kill Chu Lingfeng. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been difficult for Chu Yuqing's guards to kill Chu Lingfeng, since they had already surrounded him. There was no way they could have dragged this out for so long. They were desperately trying to exhaust Chu Lingfeng's bloodline power. Seeing that his injuries were becoming more and more difficult to heal, the sneers on their faces deepened. Just then they heard the sound of a stampeding horde of magical beasts. Chu Yuqing immediately waved his hand. Get out of the way. Let those magical beasts charge in and stomp him into meat paste. Chu Yuqing's expression was extremely arrogant. Chu Lingfeng was dead for sure. His bloodline power was about to be exhausted, and his healing abilities were no longer as strong as before. Once those magical beasts swarmed him, they would definitely trample him to death. At that time, what undying body, what unique bloodline. All of it would be a joke. The true winner would be him, Chu Yuqing. It would be their third elder's faction. With a wave of his hand, Chu Yuqing's guards immediately scattered, revealing a path that led to Chu Lingfeng's encirclement. The group stood at both ends, waiting for the magical beast to charge in and trample Chu Lingfeng to death. Rumble. The magical beast stomps were extremely loud. Very quickly, a line of magical beasts appeared in front of Chu Yuqing and the others. Why isn't there anyone in front of these magical beasts? Chu Yuqing and the others looked at the horde of magical beasts charging in their direction in confusion. Why were these magical beasts running over on their own? Where were the guards? Were they behind them? With this thought in mind, they immediately raised their heads and looked behind them. However, that place was filled with smoke and dust caused by the magical beasts' movements. None of them could clearly see the scene behind them. They didn't care about it in their hearts. They were just waiting for those magic beasts to rush over and crush Chu Lingfeng. However, no one noticed that when the magical beasts arrived, Snowball, who had been constantly wailing and struggling to get up to help Chu Lingfeng, only to be suppressed by the attacks of Chu Yuqing and the others, suddenly looked in the direction of the magical beasts with pleasant surprise. Brr. It opened its throat and snarled. To Chu Yuqing and the others, that sound was nothing more than a cold howl. But only Snowball knew that it was full of surprises. Master is here. After such a long time, Snowball was unable to restrain the excitement and anticipation in her heart as she once again felt Luo Qingtong's existence at such a close distance. Chapter 2583. In the end, this beast wasn't easy to deal with, and had tortured him to the point of hovering between life and death. But with Chu Lingfeng protecting it, there was nothing he could do. His master couldn't deal with it and his pet couldn't either. It could be said that Chu Yuqing hated this man and beast to the bone. What he didn't know was that Chu Lingfeng wasn't Snowball's master at all. And the latter's surprised cries weren't because of Chu Lingfeng either. Boom. The magical beasts had already charged in front of them, and the guards had already scattered, waiting to see a good show. However, before they could react, a voice rang out. Swish, swish, swish. Invisible threads shot out from the back of the horde and blocked the path of the demonic beast. The demonic beasts that had long been used to being chased away by Luo Qingtong's threads suddenly stopped in their tracks. They had originally been charging towards Chu Lingfeng, who was in the middle of the encirclement, but they immediately scattered and charged towards Chu Yuqing and the others. What? Chu Yuqing and the others had been waiting to see Chu Lingfeng get trampled to death, but they hadn't expected that the magical beasts would suddenly change directions. This time they had become the magical beast's targets. Damn it, what's going on? The smile on Chu Yuqing's face instantly froze. His lips were still curled upward, but his face was filled with disbelief. Seeing those magical beasts rushing towards them, he hurriedly shouted in exasperation, Quick! Stop them. Drive them into the encirclement. Chu Yuqing's heart was in a state of panic. The magical beasts' attacks were secondary. More importantly, he was afraid that the magical beasts would break through the encirclement. That way Chu Lingfeng would be able to escape with his life. Damn it, what's going on? Why are these magical beasts suddenly charging at us? Before Chu Yuqing and the others could figure out what was going on, a crimson figure shot out from behind the magical beast horde like a bolt of lightning. In an instant, it had entered the encirclement and appeared beside Chu Yuqing. Luo Qingtong's body was covered with the blood of the guards she had killed. Her light blue robe was also dyed red. At this moment she was standing beside Chu Lingfeng. She looked at him and snorted, "Blockhead?" As soon as she spoke, Chu Lingfeng, who was still vigilant because of her appearance, was stunned. Then he cried out in surprise, "Master!" His eyes were filled with surprise and excitement as he looked at the blood-robed young man in front of him. Excitement were unable to express his feelings at this moment. He fiercely wiped the blood off his face. He was both emotional and wanted to cry. "Wu, Master, I miss you so much." As he spoke, he was about to fly over, but was stopped by Luo Qingtong. "Hey, wait. Let's leave this place first." Luo Qingtong raised a hand to stop him. Her heart was filled with helplessness. This blockhead, can't he look at the situation first? What's he getting so worked up for? It's more important to leave first. Luo Qingtong was speechless. However, she was already used to Chu Lingfeng's one-track mind and foolish personality. She knew that it was useless to bicker with him, so she didn't waste any more time talking nonsense with him. Hearing this, Chu Lingfeng's expression became solemn. "Yes, Master, I'll listen to you." He wiped the tears from his face and stood beside Luo Qingtong in a flash. But very quickly, his domineering expression turned into a pitiful one. Chapter 2584. Chu Lingfeng's body was covered in wounds, and the healing of his bloodline power was becoming slower and slower. Most importantly, there was no more spiritual energy in his body. After entering the abandoned continent, Chu Lingfeng had obtained a lot of spiritual herbs, all of which had been found by Snowball. But now, under the siege of Chu Yuqing and the others, the spiritual herbs he'd obtained had all been used up. Otherwise, Snowball wouldn't have been so powerless. "Don't worry, I have some." As Luo Qingtong spoke, she raised her hand and took out the spiritual herbs in her storage ring, then threw them to Chu Lingfeng. She had been running all the way here with those magical beasts, and it wasn't like she hadn't done anything. Those spiritual herbs had all been picked by her along the way. As long as Chu Lingfeng needed them, she could have as many of these spiritual herbs as she wanted. "This is for you. You and Snowball can eat it together." Luo Qingtong threw 2 bottles of pills to Chu Lingfeng. She wanted him to feed them to himself and Snowball. The pills that Luo Qingtong refined all had medicinal properties on the abandoned continent. Although the effects of these pills weren't as good as 20% of what they were outside, it was still better than nothing. What's more, Luo Qingtong didn't have much on hand, but she had a lot of pills. These pills had all been refined by her in Heavenly Wind Mercenary City. After all, she'd had nothing to do at that time. She'd gotten a lot of benefits from appraising the items of those mercenary groups. Chu Lingfeng took the pills that Luo Qingtong gave him. Without saying anything, he directly poured out a bottle and ate it. The rest was all given to Snowball. He didn't ask Luo Qingtong why her pills still had medicinal properties on the abandoned continent. From Chu Lingfeng's point of view, his master could do anything that would shock people. It wouldn't be too much. This was his master. Heretical Dr. Ghost Eye. "Master, I'm done." Chu Lingfeng was in high spirits. As soon as Luo Qingtong's medicine entered his mouth, all the wounds on his body were healed. However, the bloodline power in his body had been exhausted, and he could no longer convert the attacks of others into energy like before. While healing himself, he could still fight bravely. Right now, he had the strength of an ordinary cultivator. Chu Lingfeng was worried that he couldn't protect Luo Qingtong. After all, Master's strength hasn't even reached the venerable realm. He was really too useless. She actually needed her master to save her at this time. Chu Lingfeng was vexed. He opened his mouth, wanting to tell Luo Qingtong to leave first, but he saw Luo Qingtong's figure rise. "Let's go." She jumped onto Snowball's body and pulled Chu Lingfeng up. Snowball's internal injuries had healed. Its broken right leg had also recovered to its original state. The moment Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng came up, it immediately soared into the air. Chu Lingfeng. Chu Yuqing and the others were currently dealing with the rampaging magical beasts. He'd been paying attention to Chu Lingfeng the entire time. When he saw Luo Qingtong appear by Chu Lingfeng's side, his expression immediately froze. When he saw Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng both get onto Snowball's body, he was stunned. Snowball, who had been seriously injured and unable to move, suddenly soared into the air. Chu Yuqing's expression was indescribably furious. "Hurry! Hurry and bring them down for me. He absolutely couldn't let Chu Lingfeng escape. Chu Lingfeng's voice was hoarse. Chapter 2585. What's going on? Who's that youth that suddenly appeared? Why did he suddenly come to save Chu Lingfeng? And how did the injuries on Chu Lingfeng and that demonic beast heal so quickly? Chu Yuqing's expression was malevolent. As he thought about these questions, the expression on his face kept changing. His facial expression was twitching violently for an indescribable reason. The guards had been in the middle of driving away and stopping the demonic beasts. When they heard his voice, they raised their heads and saw Chu Lingfeng and Luo Qingtong soaring into the air. They were instantly shocked. Quick, stop them. The guards were so anxious that they didn't have time to deal with the demonic beasts. They leapt into the air and charged towards Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng. Master. Seeing the guards, all of whom were at the 6th level of the human martial realm, rushing over, Chu Lingfeng felt extremely vexed. If he'd known that he'd run into his master here, he would have brought the guards the Tianfeng Chu clan had prepared for him. He definitely wouldn't have let Chu Yuqing and the others have the chance to harm his master. Chu Yuqing, you bastard. If you dare to harm my master, I'll kill you. Sitting on the little snowball, Chu Lingfeng's eyes were bloodshot as he watched the guards charge at him. He clenched his fists tightly as he shouted at Chu Yuqing and the others below him. Stop. Master. Chu Yuqing and the others were shocked. They'd never heard of a fool like Chu Lingfeng having a master? Chu Yuqing carefully examined Luo Qingtong and discovered that she was only at the venerable realm. He immediately laughed coldly. Ah, a bastard child outside is a bastard child. Chu Lingfeng. You fool, you're actually willing to degrade yourself and recognize a kid who isn't even at the venerable realm as your master. How can someone like you be worthy of being our Chu clan's young master? Today I'll clean up the house on behalf of the Tianfeng Chu clan. When Chu Yuqing saw how protective Chu Lingfeng was of Luo Qingtong, he felt both proud and pleasantly surprised. He hadn't expected to reap such a harvest this time. Chu Lingfeng, this fool, was willing to degrade himself to become someone else's servant. Since that's the case, don't blame me for using this weakness to kill him. Chu Yuqing didn't care who Luo Qingtong was. In any case, since she appeared here, she was already a dead person. Kill them. Chu Yuqing gave the order to the guards. Earlier, he didn't dare to kill Chu Lingfeng here because there was no one to take the blame for them. But now, Luo Qingtong's appearance gave them a reason. After killing them here, he would make it look like Chu Lingfeng was killed by the young man. What did this matter have to do with them? At that time, they would find out the identities of Chu Lingfeng and this young man. Everything would be settled, wouldn't it? This was a weakness that Chu Lingfeng had personally delivered to his doorstep. How could he not make good use of it? Chu Yuqing threw his head back and laughed heartily. Then he gave the order, his killing intent overflowing. The guards were also thinking the same thing as Chu Yuqing. Immediately, those who attacked did not hold back in the slightest. Luo Qingtong narrowed her eyes as she watched the figures rushing towards them from all directions. 3rd level of the human martial realm, 6th level of the human martial realm, 4th level of the human martial realm. TSK, they're all experts. The Tianfeng Chu clan really spared no effort in protecting their top disciples. Chapter 2586. Luo Qingtong raised her hand to stop Chu Lingfeng, who was about to attack. This guy was only at the peak of the 9th level of the Amethyst Elder. Although the strength he could display was comparable to that of the human martial realm, his bloodline strength had been exhausted. How could he be a match for these people? She didn't go through untold hardships to save him just to see him throw his life away. You stay here obediently. Luo Qingtong scolded Chu Lingfeng in a low voice. Then she raised her hand and in an instant she was surrounded by circles of silk. Swish, swish. These silk threads circled around Luo Qingtong, enveloping her, Chu Lingfeng and Snowball. Let's go. Looking at the guards who were rushing over, Luo Qingtong's lips curled up slightly. She patted Snowball's back, telling it not to stop and to continue rushing forward. After receiving her order, Snowball didn't hesitate in the slightest. Its 4 limbs stomped fiercely in the air, and in an instant, it was like a snow-white stream of light, rushing towards the guards who were rushing over. Humph, overestimating yourself. You actually dare to rush towards us. These guards thought highly of themselves. Luo Qingtong's strength wasn't even at the revered realm. This was obvious in their eyes. In addition, Chu Lingfeng's bloodline strength had been exhausted. No matter how the crowd calculated, Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng couldn't rush out of the encirclement they were in. Since the other party was rushing over to be killed, then they would fulfill her wish. The crowd rushed towards Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng fiercely. Because they were proud, they didn't use any martial skills to attack Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng. Otherwise, they would have discovered that Luo Qingtong was surrounded by circles of silk, surrounding her and Chu Lingfeng from all directions. At this moment, Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng were like huge meat grinders as they rushed forward. As for those guards, they still didn't know anything. Get down here. At this moment, a guard rushed towards Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng. He raised his hand and tried to grab Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng off Snowball. However, just as his hand reached out, in an instant, a tragic cry rang out. In an instant, the hands that the guard had extended towards Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng were cut into countless pieces of flesh. The invisible threads around Luo Qingtong were rapidly revolving around her. No one knew what kind of terrifying power the threads of the 1,000 silkworms would display in this kind of situation. These threads were originally the weapons that the 1,000 silkworms relied on to survive. Many magical beasts and humans who were stronger than them had died under their threats. Now, in Luo Qingtong's hands, these threads were displaying an even more terrifying power. Luo Qingtong didn't need to use any of her own strength. She only needed to maintain these threads at high speed. These incomparably tenacious threads that were difficult to cut would, in an instant, teach these human martial realm guards what it meant to be a human. What? Seeing this scene, Chu Yuqing and the other guards below were all shocked. Chapter 2587. What are those? Chu Yuqing's face turned pale with shock as he cried out. What were those things that could actually injure a human martial realm expert by his side, a youth who hadn't even reached the venerable realm? What was going on? Chu Yuqing's mind was in a complete mess. As for the other guards, their faces were also filled with indescribable shock and regret. They simply couldn't answer Chu Yuqing's question. Because even they didn't know what those things were. They looked like silk threads. But what kind of silk threads could allow a youth who hadn't even reached the venerable realm to injure a human martial realm guard? What's more, that guard wasn't an ordinary low-level human martial realm expert. Rather, he was an expert at the 4th level of the human martial realm. Everyone's faces were filled with shock as they watched the human martial realm guard clutch his arm and howl miserably. Then he was cut into pieces by the silk threads around Luo Qingtong. The silk threads around Luo Qingtong were dyed with blood. Like sharp blades flying up and down, they completely surrounded her, Chu Lingfeng and Snowball. Everywhere they passed, the human martial realm guards who were attacking her were all injured by the silk threads around her body. These silk threads didn't have much power. But these silk threads, which didn't have much power, were like divine weapons, preventing the group of human martial realm guards from attacking. Facing Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng, who were completely wrapped in these silk threads, they finally understood what kind of situation they were in. They could either let Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng go, or they could forcefully attack under the terrifying defense of Luo Qingtong's silk threads and be strangled to death. A youth who hadn't even reached the venerable realm, carrying some unknown silk threads, had actually forced them to this point. Chu Yuqing looked at Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng in the sky. He was so angry that he gnashed his teeth and stomped his feet, but there was nothing he could do. The threads in Luo Qingtong's hands were very difficult to cut. However, Luo Qingtong's blood-red eyes allowed her to easily see the trajectories of the human martial realm guards' attacks. The threads in her hands were constantly changing and reforming. Under her control, the silk threads in her hands changed in many ways. Compared to the silk webs spat out by the 1,000 silkworms, their power and effectiveness were many times more difficult to deal with. After the guards tried to attack several times but were killed instead, they didn't dare to move again. They could only watch as Luo Qingtong took Chu Lingfeng away. A young man who hadn't even reached the venerable realm had saved the person they wanted to kill from the hands of a group of people who were around the 6th level of the human martial realm. If they hadn't experienced it themselves, they wouldn't have dared to believe that it was true. Especially those human martial realm guards. They looked at Luo Qingtong as if they were looking at a monster. They didn't doubt that if it wasn't for Luo Qingtong's insufficient strength, she could have used these silk threads to completely trap them here. What was going on? Who exactly was this young man? Their hearts were overwhelmed with shock. Luo Qingtong had already taken Chu Lingfeng far away. The power of her silk threads looked very frightening. But that was only because those guards hadn't reacted in time. Chapter 2588. Luo Qingtong was well aware of the limitations of the power of her threads. Therefore, as soon as she opened a gap, she immediately left with Chu Lingfeng and Snowball. Chu Yuqing quickly reacted after they left, and then flew into a rage. Chu Lingfeng. His voice was filled with rage as if he was about to cry blood. By the time he wanted the guards to chase after them, Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng had already disappeared. Instantly, he spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground with a thud. He was obviously very angry. How could Chu Yuqing not be angry? In order to kill Chu Lingfeng, how long had he planned? He had just lured Chu Lingfeng into this dense forest, and had made all the necessary preparations to ambush him. In the end, just as he was about to make his move, someone had interfered and rescued him. If that person had been a powerful cultivator, it would have been fine. But the other party was a youth who had not even reached the venerable realm. This was such a great humiliation. No matter how tenacious and valiant Chu Yuqing's mind was, he could not bear this blow. Moreover, if he missed the chance to kill Chu Lingfeng this time, he might not have such a chance again. And once Chu Lingfeng returned to the Tianfeng Chu clan, what kind of punishment and revenge would he and the Third Elder's faction suffer? Chu Yuqing did not dare to think about it. This time he was truly infuriated. He could not control the surging emotions in his heart. When his blood-sobbing scream rang out, on the small slope outside the dense forest, Chu Ke and the others' hearts all jumped. That voice just now, it sounded like my big brother's? Chu Ke's face was full of shock. She looked in the direction of the dense forest, and the expression on her face kept changing. What was going on? Why was her big brother's voice so blood-sobbing and mournful? Could it be that something had gone wrong with killing Chu Lingfeng? As she thought of this, her heart was suddenly in chaos. At this moment, the voices of Chu Tianming and the others suddenly sounded. Look, that white light. They raised their hands and pointed at a ray of light that swept across the sky above the dense forest. If that light wasn't a snowball, then what was it? They were shocked to see Chu Lingfeng and Luo Qingtong sitting on Snowball. Oh no, Chu Lingfeng is not dead. The Third Elder's faction was finished, and so were they. At this time, someone with sharp eyes saw Luo Qingtong sitting in front of Chu Lingfeng. It's Luo Xiaoqi. It's Luo Xiaoqi. Chu Tianming and the others cried out in a shrill voice. They looked at the young man sitting on the snowball in disbelief, unable to wrap their heads around the situation. What was going on? Why was Luo Xiaoqi here? And with Chu Lingfeng? Could it be that Chu Lingfeng's rescue had something to do with her? Everyone was shocked. Chapter 2589. She was the one who had subtly influenced Chu Ke to bring up all of this. Why was this Luo Xiaoqi messing things up again? Was this person really her nemesis? Why was she always ruining her plans? Chu Yufei bit her lip hard, while Chu Ke screamed with a sharp expression. Damn it, why is this Luo Xiaoqi here again? Why is it her again? Like Chu Yufei, Chu Ke hated Luo Qingtong to the bone. Now that she had appeared, she was with Chu Lingfeng. And the latter had obviously escaped from her big brother's trap. In an instant, blood surged in her mind. The next second she fell to the ground with a bang. She had fainted from anger. Luo Qingtong didn't know about this episode. She took Chu Lingfeng and Snowball and flew for a while. Soon they appeared in a safe dense forest. This place was already very far from the dense forest where Chu Yuqing and the others had set up an ambush. Along the way, Luo Qingtong's blood eye looked after them. Luo Qingtong and the others didn't encounter a single magical beast. Instead, they plucked a lot of spiritual herbs. Luo Qingtong gave half of the spiritual herbs to Chu Lingfeng. She put the rest in her pocket, ready to take it back to Yi Qianxian and the others. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to explain herself if someone was looking for her but couldn't find her after being out for so long. Luo Qingtong didn't want to expose her identity yet. Therefore, she didn't want to say anything about Chu Lingfeng for the time being. 2 people and 1 beast landed in the dense forest. Luo Qingtong found a hidden cave and settled Chu Lingfeng and Snowball down. Because there were no outsiders around, Luo Qingtong directly took out the beast-repelling powder and sprinkled it around the cave. After confirming that no more magical beasts would pass by, she immediately looked at Chu Lingfeng and said, "How are you? Are you okay? How's the recovery in your body?" Luo Qingtong was naturally asking about Chu Lingfeng's bloodline power. She had long known that Chu Lingfeng's physique was different from ordinary people. Previously, the situation was urgent, so she didn't have time to check on Chu Lingfeng. Only now did she have the time to ask him about his condition. "I'm fine, master. I just overused my energy. I'll be fine after a few days of rest," Chu Lingfeng said with a simple and honest expression. He looked at Luo Qingtong and said with a silly smile, "Mistress, I didn't expect it to be you. I thought I was dreaming." Chu Lingfeng was overjoyed. He had never thought that Luo Qingtong would actually be on this abandoned continent. Moreover, he had come to save him when he was in danger. How could Master be so powerful and godly? How did she know that he was here and that he was in danger? Chu Lingfeng looked at Luo Qingtong with eyes full of worship and reverence. Luo Qingtong looked at his fanboy eyes and couldn't help but feel angry and amused. What was this big blockhead thinking? She wasn't an immortal who could predict. It was just a coincidence that she knew that he was in danger on this abandoned continent. However, Luo Qingtong also knew that she couldn't explain it to Chu Lingfeng clearly, so she simply let him think whatever he wanted. Little Snowball told me to come over, Luo Qingtong said. Then she frowned and asked Chu Lingfeng, who is the person who wants to kill you? Although Luo Qingtong had already guessed that it might be related to the third elder, she still wanted to confirm it. It's Chu Yuqing. Chapter 2590. He scratched his head, then said uncertainly, that should be his name. He had offended too many members of the Tianfeng Chu clan. Chu Lingfeng didn't even remember their names. Chu Lingfeng had only managed to remember Chu Yuqing's name after he'd revealed it during the ambush. If Chu Yuqing knew that the person he wanted to kill didn't even know who he was, who knew if he'd spit out a few more mouthfuls of blood? Luo Qingtong looked at him with amusement, then asked, is he from the third elder's faction? That's right. Mistress, how did you know? Chu Lingfeng had a look of surprise on his face that said, Mistress, you're so amazing. Luo Qingtong burst into laughter. Alright, you should stay here and recuperate. Wait until your bloodline power recovers, then you can go out. Also, I'm going to cancel Snowball's contract. You can contract with it. As Luo Qingtong spoke, she lifted her hand and cancelled the contract with Snowball. Chu Lingfeng wanted to stop her, but it was already too late. Oh, Mistress, how can I steal your contracted beast? He hurriedly rushed over to stop Luo Qingtong, but she dodged him. Alright, you've been taking care of Snowball all this time. It's better for it to be with you than with me. Besides, in your current situation, Snowball won't be able to contract with you and stay by your side. I'm worried. Luo Qingtong couldn't possibly bring Chu Lingfeng back to the camp. First of all, his bloodline power would recover after it was exhausted, and he couldn't let anyone know about it. Otherwise, it'd be troublesome if someone targeted him in the future. Moreover, the camp was filled with all sorts of people. Luo Qingtong might be able to shut some people up, but she might not be able to shut everyone's mouths. Secondly, Luo Qingtong didn't want others to know about her relationship with Chu Lingfeng for the time being. This blockhead couldn't hide anything on his face. If he were to follow him, he would definitely not be able to resist getting closer to him and listening to him. At that time, wouldn't her identity be exposed immediately? Thinking of the man in her camp who was still kept in the dark, Luo Qingtong felt guilty. Forget it, she'd better be fully prepared before she laid her cards on the table with that man. Luo Qingtong had a toothache when she thought of this. Chu Lingfeng, on the other hand, couldn't change her mind. He immediately contracted Snowball with tears in his eyes. Master, you are so good to me. Luo Qingtong looked at him and couldn't help but laugh. This big blockhead. Luo Qingtong didn't stay in the cave for long. She arranged for Chu Lingfeng to recuperate there. After recovering his bloodline power, she returned to the camp. Not long after she left, Chu Yuqing woke up in the ambush area. He went around asking for Chu Lingfeng and Luo Qingtong's whereabouts. When he found out that the two of them had disappeared without a trace, his face instantly twisted with indescribable malevolence. Find them. Even if you have to turn the entire abandoned continent upside down, you must find Chu Lingfeng and that youth's whereabouts. Chu Yuqing's heart was filled with fear. Chu Lingfeng definitely couldn't leave the abandoned continent alive. Otherwise, he and the third elder's people would all be finished. Take me to the other top disciples. His face was cold and gloomy. Now that things had come to this, he could only make a big concession and have the others attack together with him to kill Chu Lingfeng on this abandoned continent. But if they did that, third elder's faction would definitely be at a disadvantage in the struggle for the position of direct descendant. Damn it, who was that youth who had suddenly appeared? Chu Yuqing's face was extremely malevolent and terrifying. Chapter 2591. Interesting. That youth just now was really powerful. He was able to easily escape from a group of martial arts realm experts with his strength not even at the venerable realm. What are those threads in his hands? A middle-aged man sighed. He was surrounded by an extremely powerful and vast aura. If Chu Yuqing and the others were here, they would not be able to help but cry out in shock. Because this man's strength was at the earth realm. Not only him but the people around him were also at this level of cultivation. This kind of strength was not common even in a 4 or 5-star region, let alone a 6-star region. Not to mention a group of people like this. At this moment, these people were looking in the direction that Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng had left. When his voice sounded, a cold and handsome youth in front of the group said in a deep voice, "It's the threads of the thousand silkworm." This man's face was handsome and cold, and his entire body was filled with a blade-like aura. He was surrounded by the crowd, and at this moment he said indifferently, "That youth is holding the threads of the thousand silkworm." At this point, a look of surprise flashed across his face. It was not because of anything else, but because the threads of the thousand silkworm were very difficult to find. Generally speaking, it was basically impossible to capture the thousand silkworm alive. This was because this kind of demonic beast was very good at seeking benefits and avoiding danger. Generally speaking, when they found that the situation was unfavorable to them, they would immediately retreat and would never give others a chance to surround and attack them. Not to mention being killed by others. Even if someone managed to surround the thousand silkworm, it would be impossible for them to obtain its corpse in one piece while being surrounded by its threads. This was because the threads of the thousand silkworm were very difficult to deal with. In summary, it was basically very difficult to obtain the threads of the thousand silkworm. However, the youth just now took a lot of them. Not only that, but the way she used those threads was very skillful. Zhang Beiyue saw clearly that after the youth broke into the encirclement, she did not suffer any injuries until she left with the man behind her. It was not easy for a youth who was not even at the venerable realm to be able to escape from the encirclement of these human realm guards. Yet she was still unharmed. This young man is indeed very powerful. Zhang Beiyue's expression was indifferent as he looked in the direction Luo Qingtong left. There was obvious admiration in his eyes. Even if he were in Luo Qingtong's position and had the same strength as her, he wouldn't be able to do it. That young man just now was indeed very powerful. His words caused everyone to feel a wave of surprise in their hearts. The threads of the thousand silkworms? Oh my God, there's actually someone who can get their hands on that kind of thing? Someone in the crowd exclaimed in a low voice. They naturally knew about the thousand silkworm's threads. However, no one had expected that the young man would be holding such a thread in his hand. After all, the silk of the thousand silkworm was very hard to come by. Even if they went to hunt the thousand silkworms, it would be easy to kill them. However, it would be difficult to preserve their corpses and extract the threads from them. He didn't expect that the young man just now could do it. Not only that, she seemed to have a lot of threads in her hands. Chapter 2592. That young man was indeed very powerful. It was a pity that he had matters to attend to in the abandoned continent and could not divert his attention to other matters. Otherwise, it would not be impossible to recruit her to his side and become a member of the Zhan family. After all, her monstrous and outstanding ability was rare even in the 3-star region. Especially the way she manipulated the threads. If he was not wrong, if the other party was slightly stronger, she could completely strangle all those in the human martial realm here. Zhang Beiyue immediately retracted his gaze as he thought of this. He turned to the person beside him and asked, "Those people just now, are they from the Chu family?" "Yes." The middle-aged man replied. He was a little surprised that Zhang Beiyue suddenly asked this. Didn't the young master never care about these things? When those people were fighting just now, he did not even look at them. He only began to pay attention after the young man appeared. "Yes." Zhang Beiyue responded in a low voice and did not say anything else. Instead, he asked about other matters. "How's the matter from before? Is there still no trace of the demonic moon sect?" "No." Everyone's expression froze when they heard his words. The middle-aged man from before said, "The abandoned continent has been too chaotic recently. We found traces of the demonic moon sect several times before, but they were all destroyed." When he said this, he immediately frowned. This chaos was naturally because of the Chu and Lian families. Zhang Beiyue and the others had appeared on the abandoned continent earlier than the Chu and Lian families. For some reason, the Chu and Lian families did not know of their existence. Zhang Beiyue's expression darkened when he heard this. "Then forget it. Don't worry about them for now. Anyway, they're already seriously injured. They can't do anything. The most important thing is that thing. If I'm not wrong, it should be in the heart of the continent. This sky luo grass should have been born from it," Lin Feng said. "If that's the case, then the opening of the heart of the continent will be the best time for us to get it. Let's put other matters aside first." "Yes." The crowd responded in unison. Then they followed Zhang Beiyue's figure and disappeared into the dense forest. After they left, Chu Yuqing and the others didn't know that there was someone in the forest who was watching everything they had done. Meanwhile, on the other side, Luo Qingtong had returned to the campsite. She had just stepped into the camp when she heard a cold voice ringing in her ears. "You're back early." The voice was cold and angry. Luo Qingtong's heart skipped a beat. "Aha. Good morning, brother." Luo Qingtong raised her head guiltily and greeted the man who was striding towards her. She originally wanted to sneak back to the camp and then sneak back to her tent. Chapter 2593. It's already dark? Luo Qingtong's lips twitched as she looked at the dark sky. She didn't know what to say. Oh my god, why is she so easy to say? Cough. Well, I actually wanted to say good evening. Luo Qingtong braced herself and said. Really? Yi Qianming narrowed his eyes. This woman's ability to lie through her teeth was getting better and better. Yes. Luo Qingtong nodded quickly. She was relieved when she saw that Yi Qianming didn't seem to notice the kiss mark on her neck. At this moment, Yi Qianming's voice suddenly sounded. I heard that when people are nervous, it's easy to pant and say the wrong thing. Luo Xiaoqi, what are you nervous about? Yi Qianming raised his eyebrows and looked at Luo Qingtong with a faint smile on his face. Did this woman think that she could get away with it? When she heard Yi Qianming's voice, Luo Qingtong gasped instantly. She looked at Yi Qianming and her mind was filled with thoughts. Oh my god. Did he find out? Did he see through it? But it didn't seem like it. Luo Qingtong imagined the scene when Yi Qianming found the kiss mark on her neck. He would fly into a rage. He would hit her without saying a word. The only thing that didn't happen was this. Did he find out or not? But regardless of whether he found out or not, Luo Qingtong felt that she had to prepare for the worst. Otherwise, if she was really found out, she wouldn't even have a chance to save herself. Luo Qingtong thought so and suddenly coughed softly. She said to Yi Qianming, Brother, you probably don't know. After we fell asleep last night, a super big mosquito suddenly flew into the tent. I was bitten by the mosquito countless times last night. Were you bitten? Luo Qingtong looked at Yi Qianming with a hopeful face. She had already thought about it. If Yi Qianming said yes, then it must be because he found the hickeys on his body. At that time, he would just say that it was a mosquito bite and not admit it even if he was beaten to death. If he said that he didn't, it would mean that he didn't discover anything. It was even better if he didn't find out. He didn't have to worry anymore. When he found out later, he would also think that it was a mosquito bite. She really was a genius. As for Luo Qingtong herself, she had already used the cupping technique to leave a few marks on her body. Although the marks were very different from the hickeys, it was impossible for mosquitoes to only bite one shape, right? Right. So what if her mosquito pack was different from the rest? Luo Qingtong's words almost made Yi Qianming laugh in anger. Mosquito? That was a really big mosquito. Yi Qianming gritted his teeth as he glared at Luo Qingtong. He almost couldn't hold it in anymore and wanted to expose Luo Qingtong's identity. Then he would pull her into his arms and tell her how that big mosquito stung people. This woman. To think that she could come up with such an excuse and reason. Yi Qianming took a deep breath. He always felt that this woman was the tribulation in his life. It made him love and hate, anxious and angry. She was really made by God to be his jinx. Otherwise, why would he be so helpless? I wasn't bitten by a mosquito. Hurry up and go back to the tent. But I don't want to wait for you to sleep at night. Yi Qianming's voice was cold and he finally suppressed the impulse in his heart. If he continued to talk to this woman, he would be angered to death sooner or later. Chapter 2594. Oh, that brother, I've thought about it. I'll sleep in the same tent as them tonight. Otherwise, it'll be too much trouble for you. In fact, Luo Qingtong was afraid of her. Oh my god, she didn't even know that she was sleepwalking in the middle of the night. She thought about how she left a kiss mark on Yi Qianming's body in a daze last night. Who knew what she would do tonight? She'd better keep a distance from Yi Qianming. However, just as she thought of this, she was lifted up by Yi Qianming in an instant and brought back to the tent. Sleep in the same tent as others? Yi Qianming's thin lips curled up slightly. For some reason he felt like he was grinding his teeth. How can that be? There's still a big mosquito in my tent. Before it leaves, you'd better stay here obediently, lest I'm the only one who gets bitten. After all, that mosquito only appeared after you came. What do you think? Yi Qianming's voice was gloomy. If he didn't have a trace of self-control and knew that this woman didn't want to reveal her identity, he really would have pressed Luo Qingtong into his arms and kissed her fiercely. This woman still wanted to sleep with others? He didn't allow it before he knew her identity, so it was even more impossible now. She dared to step out of this tent. He would never let her do as she wished. Yi Qianming could do anything for Luo Qingtong. She didn't want to reveal her identity, so he pretended that he didn't know. She was bold and arrogant, so he let her be. As long as this woman was happy, it was fine. But the only thing she couldn't do was to let him lose her. Not to mention sleeping in the same bed with another man. Of course, a woman couldn't do it either. Yi Qianming's eyes were cold and he directly threw Luo Qingtong onto the bed. The latter's lips twitched and she didn't know what to say. She really wanted to grab this man and tell him, "The mosquito you're talking about is me. It's me. As long as you let go of me, there won't be any more mosquitoes." But she didn't dare. She was Luo Xiaoqi. Luo Xiaoqi. If she admitted that she had molested Yi Qianming, the consequences would be terrible. She wouldn't be able to bear it at all. Luo Qingtong's lips twitched and she decided to give up in the end. Forget it, she would sleep here for another night. When there were no more mosquitoes biting him tomorrow, she should be free. At that time he would have to sleep in another tent, even if he had to sleep with Big Sister in you. Luo Qingtong thought. She covered her head with the quilt and fell asleep. Before going to bed, she did not forget to tie her hands and feet with silk thread. She didn't believe that she would still be able to touch Yi Qianming. For Luo Qingtong, liking Yi Qianming had already become an instinct. It had been such a long time since he had transmigrated. The man had already integrated into her life just like the other half of her life. She unconsciously wanted to hug him and rely on him. These feelings of love and affection that he had never felt had anything to do with him had all appeared in front of him. Therefore, she absolutely believed that she would unconsciously touch Yi Qianming after falling asleep in the middle of the night. That was because this man had already melted into her life. Chapter 2595. The girl's figure was petite and she directly fell into his arms. They fit perfectly as if they were a match made in heaven. Humph, this is the most obedient moment. Yi Qianming snorted and kissed her lips fiercely. Feeling his breath, Luo Qingtong snorted twice and responded to him automatically. Her whole body was desperately trying to squeeze into his arms. His hands also began to move restlessly. But her hands and feet were tied and she couldn't move for a while. In the end, she could only give up. Her voice was soft, but it was also domineering and proud. She unconsciously fought with Yi Qianming for control of the kiss. The back and forth between the two of them was like a battle between two kings. Of course, this time, because Luo Qingtong's hands and feet were tied, Yi Qianming naturally won. He pressed Luo Qingtong on the bed and kissed her carefully. The candlelight and the shadows under the moon were entangled. The next day, Luo Qingtong woke up in Yi Qianming's arms. That's right. In his arms. That wasn't the point. The point was that she took off Yi Qianming's clothes. She took it off. Luo Qingtong looked at everything in front of her in a daze. She looked at her hands grabbing Yi Qianming's clothes. Half of the man's clothes had been pulled down by her. Half of his honey-colored chest and half of his arms, as well as his strong shoulders, were exposed in the air. Yi Qianming's hair was loose and scattered on the bed. At this moment he was wearing a white jade mask and looking at Luo Qingtong with a dark face. Don't ask her how she could see that his face was dark even with the mask. It was because the low pressure around him was about to freeze into ice, okay? Luo Qingtong looked at her tied hands that were restless. She couldn't touch him and leave a kiss mark, so she actually took off his clothes. If she had known earlier, she would have tied all 10 of her fingers. That. Brother, listen to my explanation. Luo Qingtong swallowed her saliva. Oh my god, Yi Qianming was a feast for the eyes. She really wanted to pounce on him. Sob, sob, sob. She had to try her best to resist. Yi Qianming's eyes were cold as he looked at her. Last night you said you would help me get rid of the mosquitoes. Is this how you do it? As he spoke, he casually raised his hand and pointed at the scratches on his neck and shoulders. Luo Qingtong covered her face. What a beast. What a beast. It was obvious that she wanted to take off Yi Qianming's clothes, but the latter refused, so she caught him. Why did she have to be such a beast? Chasing away mosquitoes? Could these words be any more shameless? Yi Qianming didn't kill her on the spot because her identity was similar to Luo Qingtong, right? Luo Qingtong rejoiced in her heart that Yi Qianming felt a sense of familiarity when he looked at her. Otherwise, she would probably become a lecherous woman who made a move on her own man and was beaten to death by her own man. *CK, such a tragic death doesn't suit her at all. Especially if she died in the hands of her own man because of molestation, that would be too aggrieving. Brother, listen to my explanation. I really didn't do it on purpose. It's probably because I was poisoned by that mosquito last night. I dreamed that I was the mosquito and skinned you. Brother, I'm completely sincere. At this point, Luo Qingtong was almost touched by herself. F*ck, she was really a genius to be able to lie to this extent. Chapter 2596. Yi Qianming's words almost made Luo Qingtong spit out a mouthful of blood. She hurriedly wiped off her saliva. She didn't know what to say about her own deception. Damn. This time she completely believed Yi Qianming's words. She was definitely the only one who could say the word hubby. It was impossible for Yi Qianming to know these two words. Oh my god. Luo Qingtong covered her face and felt her teeth hurt badly. How was she going to explain the meaning of this word to Yi Qianming? It was simply tearing up. This was simply a big blood pit. And it was the kind of pit that she dug for herself. The word old means that you are very experienced and steady. The word public means that you are very clear about public and private matters. It means that you are fair and impartial. Brother, I have been praising you in my dreams. Are you touched? Luo Qingtong's words became smoother and smoother as she spoke. In the end, she forced herself to explain. I see. Yi Qianming looked at her and smiled slightly. The man's appearance was extremely beautiful. Even if this smile was through the mask and Luo Qingtong couldn't see it at all, she still felt that the other party seemed to be glowing. Then Luo Xiaoqi, can you tell me what you mean when you say that you are my wife? Yi Qianming's tone was slow. His voice was very slow and his words were very clear. In order to prevent Luo Qingtong from pretending not to hear it, he also directly sent those words into Luo Qingtong's ears. Luo Qingtong's mood at this moment was like thousands of grass mud horses galloping through the Gobi Desert. What kind of mother***er was this? If it weren't for her, she would definitely let the other party know how to write the word death. Yi Qianming was still waiting for Luo Qingtong's answer. Ever since he heard Luo Qingtong's nonsense about the word husband, he immediately knew that the meaning of this word was definitely not as simple as it seemed on the surface. It was very likely that there was a deeper meaning that Luo Qingtong couldn't say. That was why this woman gave a random explanation. The more she explained, the more she hid. Yi Qianming was in a very good mood at this moment, so much so that Luo Qingtong couldn't answer and ran away without catching her. Because he already got the answer he wanted. Luo Qingtong ran out of the tent and still didn't wake up from her trapping. Damn, this was simply too much of a trap. Damn it, she was really speechless. Fortunately, she ran away, otherwise she would have died. *S**. Not far away, when Bei Qing and Feng Yu saw Luo Qingtong rushing out of Yi Qianming's tent, the corners of their lips twitched. Master is teasing the evil doctor again. If the evil doctor finds out. Feng Yu touched his forehead and had a terrible headache. The two of them already knew the truth from Yi Qianming. It was mainly because they were prepared to die to persuade Yi Qianming not to abandon the evil doctor, but the truth thrown out by Yi Qianming almost made them dizzy. Luo Xiaoqi was the evil doctor. She deliberately ate the small illusion pill to disguise her identity. The two of them were dumbfounded when they heard it. On one hand, they admired the evil doctor's tricks. On the other hand, they were depressed that their master and the evil doctor had already recognized each other. Why didn't they recognize each other? They were still having fun. Not only that, their master didn't let them recognize the evil doctor. How long were the two of them going to play around like this? Master, do you know that you have been led astray by the evil doctor? Chapter 2597. He was wearing a simple white robe, which made him look like an immortal. At this moment, his feet were lightly tapped on a tree branch. He stood in the middle of a forest and looked at the group of figures in front of him indifferently. People from the demonic moon sect. His face was indifferent and his eyes were very indifferent. However, the meaning of his words made the hearts of the people in front tremble. Who are you? The group of demonic moon sect people in front of him shouted fiercely. The injuries in their group were very serious. Almost all of them were injured. If the people from the Chu and Lian families had not come to the abandoned continent and made it noisy, they would not have been able to escape from the hands of Zhan Beiyue and the others. After all, in this abandoned continent, they were seriously injured and could not be compared to Zhan Beiyue and the other elite disciples of the three-star Zhan family. The demonic moon sect was an evil sect in the three-star Great Heaven domain. Its strength was almost the same as the Zhan family. Logically speaking, they should not have been forced to such an extent by Zhan Beiyue and the others. However, the mistake was that they did not know that Zhang Beiyue and the others had come to the abandoned continent with a great conspiracy. Therefore, after seeing the actions of Zhang Beiyue and the others, they quietly followed and did not bring the most elite disciples of their family. On the other hand, Zhang Beiyue was the first young master of the Zhang family. He was the strongest genius of this generation of the Zhang family. His strength was comparable to an ordinary elder with real power. Moreover, the people he led were also the most elite disciples of the Zhang family. In this way, the demonic moon sect people suffered a great loss when facing Zhang Beiyue and the others. If the people from the Chu and Lian families had not arrived and discovered the Tianluo grass, they would not have been able to escape. Later on, the Chu clan and Lian clan were able to successfully spread the news of the Tianluo grass to the outside world because of their help. If they had not held back Zhang Beiyue and the others, the people from the Chu and Lian families would have died long ago. However, even so, they could not leave the abandoned continent at this moment. Not to mention, they already knew that the purpose of Zhang Beiyue and the others was in the heart of the continent. It was very likely that they had discovered a peerless treasure. Under such circumstances, how could the demonic moon sect members let the matter rest? But now that they were seriously injured, there was nothing they could do. At this moment, Yu Mingqian appeared. Everyone looked at Yu Mingqian warily. They didn't know how Yu Mingqian had seen through their identities and found them. Yu Mingqian didn't care about their gazes at all. He stood on the tree branch and looked at the people of the demonic moon sect coldly. He said, "You don't have to be afraid of what I will do to you. I'm not interested in trash like you. Someone from the 3-star region?" To Yu Mingqian, the young master of the Inscription City's Federation of Trade Unions, it wasn't even worth mentioning. The reason he was able to discover the demonic moon sect's traces was naturally because he had sensed their tyrannical aura, which was different from that of the Chu and Lian families. With the help of the inscription man-seeking array, he easily found their whereabouts. Yu Mingqian wasn't interested in why people from the 3-star domain would appear on the abandoned continent of the 6-star domain. Chapter 2598. Luo Qingtong was getting closer and closer to Yi Qianxian. She might not have noticed it, but Yu Mingqian could tell that she was treating Yi Qianxian and the others differently. The other party and those white jade-masked men knew each other. Not only that, but Luo Qingtong had also recognized the white-masked men. Yu Mingqian was very afraid of Yi Qianxian's strength. He regretted not attacking Luo Qingtong when they were in the Heavenly Wind Mercenary City. At that time, she had not fully come into contact with the white-masked men, and she did not recognize them. Under such circumstances, it was best to attack Luo Qingtong. But he missed the opportunity. Now he could only rely on these evil moon sect members. "I can treat your injuries and I can also help you improve your strength. As long as you promise me one thing." Yu Mingqian looked at the evil moon sect members. He believed that they would agree. After all, he was the only one on the abandoned continent who could help them. Looking at their current situation, there were obviously other enemies on the abandoned continent. They had no other choice but to promise him. Yu Mingqian's words made the evil moon sect members even more surprised. "Why should we believe you?" a ferocious-looking evil moon sect member said. He looked covetously and greedily at Yu Mingqian's fairy-like face. He laughed ferociously and said, "Since you've said it so clearly, you pretty boy. Then we'll capture you and force the method out of you. Isn't that the same?" As he spoke, he looked at Yu Mingqian with a ferocious expression and said, "Look at your delicate skin. I'm afraid you can't withstand a few rounds of torture. If you know what's good for you, hand over the method immediately. We might be able to give you some comfortable punishment." As he spoke, he laughed arrogantly with a smug look on his face. These evil moon sect members were originally from an evil sect. They did not have any taboos or bottom lines. Yu Mingqian had come alone. Although they were a little afraid, after carefully inspecting the surroundings and finding that there was no ambush and only Yu Mingqian, they immediately relaxed. Not to mention, although Yu Mingqian's temperament was extraordinary, it didn't have any deterrence or threat. Seeing that there was no trace of cultivation on his body, the group of demonic moon sect members felt disdain in their hearts. They were indeed seriously injured, but not just anyone could order them around. Since this immortal-like man wanted to make use of them, then don't blame them for being ruthless. Wouldn't it be better to capture him and slowly force him to confess his methods than to agree to his request? Why do I have to do as he says? The other party was really like a celestial being who was above the mortal world. He was really too naive. The man from the demonic moon sect was pleased with himself. The others also remained silent, tacitly agreeing with that person's actions. Their figures spread out and surrounded Yu Minglong. Seeing this scene, Yu Mingqian's eyes, which were as light as colored glass, suddenly blossomed. The coldness in them was extremely strong. Interesting. You people really don't know what's good for you. Chapter 2599. His aura completely changed the moment he made his move. An extremely cold and murderous power suddenly bloomed from his body. At the same time, an inscription pattern in his hand rushed toward the demonic moon sect member in front of him. The inscription pattern also appeared. In an instant, the sound of countless weapons whistling could be heard from it. In an instant, the demonic moon sect member seemed to be in a blood-red azure field. His surroundings were filled with weapons and traps. Battle formation initial appearance, turning void into reality, place of death. Battle inscription mark. Are you a battle soul master? Or are you a battle soul master who can turn the surrounding murderous aura into weapons? Everyone's faces were filled with shock. There were strong and weak battle soul masters. In addition to the battle inscription pattern and their own cultivation strength, there was another way. It was based on the depth and research of the battle inscription pattern. When an ordinary battle soul master controlled the battle inscription pattern, he could at most manifest the murderous aura in the battle inscription pattern. They could either turn into the shadows of swords or shrieking beasts. There were many different kinds of murderous aura. However, there was a type of battle soul master who, after deep research, could turn the battle inscription pattern in his hand into a death trap, trapping and killing the enemy he wanted to deal with there. That was not a level that an ordinary battle soul master could achieve. That would require an even more profound inscription ability. Not only that, but strength and cultivation were also indispensable. For such a battle soul master, unless his enemy's strength was far above his, he could break through 10,000 spells with brute force. Otherwise, once trapped by the death trap formed by his battle inscription pattern, it would be a situation of instant death. It was like being trapped in the domain of a sky martial realm expert. Life and death were in his hands. Just as everyone was thinking this, they heard the demonic moon sect member who was trapped by the death trap formed by Yu Ming's battle inscription pattern scream shrilly. Then, everyone saw that he was imprisoned in midair. Then, countless weapons pierced his heart in an instant. Not only that, his body seemed to be suspended by an invisible force. While hanging there, countless weapons flew past. While piercing his heart, they did not forget to slice off his flesh piece by piece. His blood-curdling screams were shrill, but in an instant he turned into a pile of white bones. Under the horrified gazes of the crowd, the demonic moon sect member who had turned into a pile of bones was still alive. What a hair-raising way to die. Everyone's eyes were filled with extreme fear. You are a battle soul master, you. Who are you? They looked at the man in front of them who looked like he was floating in the air and had no lethality at all. Yu Mingqian had completely retracted her power. She had returned to her previous powerless state. However, the crowd had just witnessed him killing the demonic moon sect member. How could they still dare to treat him as a weakling? At that moment, his heart was trembling with fear. Their strength had not recovered yet. All of them were seriously injured. They were no match for Yu Mingqian. Moreover, even if they had recovered their strength, the death trap formed by the battle inscription pattern Yu Mingqian had just revealed was not enough. Chapter 2600. What was going on? How could there be such a terrifying figure in this six-star region's abandoned continent? Given his strength, he could easily sweep across this abandoned continent. Why would he need them to do something for him? Everyone was trembling in fear as they looked at Yu Mingqian and asked, "My lord, could it be that you're also here because of the news that the Zhan family obtained? If that's the case, we're willing to be your lackeys." Their words made Yu Mingqian raise his eyebrows slightly. News from the Zhan family? He originally didn't care why these people from the demonic moon sect had come. However, after hearing what they were saying, it seemed like their purpose in coming to this abandoned continent wasn't simple. Yes. A member of the demonic moon sect said with trepidation. The Zhan family seems to have obtained news about an ancient godly item. The ancient godly item is in this abandoned continent. It's very likely that it has something to do with the changes in the heart of the continent and the birth of the sky grass. They quietly appeared in this abandoned continent and sealed off all information. It was by chance that we discovered their movements and followed them. We were accidentally discovered by them. Those people from the Zhan family are currently chasing after us. My lord, if you're also here for the ancient godly item, we're willing to listen to your orders. The member of the demonic moon sect smiled at Yu Mingqian ingratiatingly. In their opinion, Yu Mingqian's strength was tyrannical, yet he had hidden it. Since he had appeared in this abandoned continent alone, he must be here for the ancient godly item, just like them. In that case they would naturally listen to his orders. After all, they were no match for him. They also mistook Yu Mingqian's request for them to listen to his orders and help him obtain the ancient godly item in the heart of the continent. Ancient godly item? Yu Mingqian's eyes narrowed slightly. That pair of eyes that were as light as colored glass was filled with surprise. He hadn't expected that he would receive such news when he had just randomly found some people to attack Luo Qingtong. However, he didn't know if these people's information was true or false. If it was really an ancient divine object, it would not be a bad idea to obtain it. In this world, anything that had even the slightest bit of information about God was a one-in-a-million treasure. However, it was really surprising that such a treasure would appear on a small abandoned continent in a small 6-star region. Yu Mingqian's words, coupled with the meaning in his eyes, made the demonic moon sect members realize that they had guessed wrongly. This man with astonishing strength actually didn't come for the ancient divine object. They had spilled the beans. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have opened his mouth. That way, after they had gained the support of the other party and gained strength, they could then snatch the ancient divine object. Everyone was vexed in their hearts, but they didn't dare to show it on their faces. Yu Mingqian glanced at them and said, "We'll talk about the ancient divine object later. What I want you to do is something else." He told her about Luo Qingtong. "It's this young man named Luo Shaoqi. I want you to capture him. Leave it to me." You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.